mind are the people you can rely on more than those who just intellectually arrive at a conclusion. Because the ones who stay the course under pressure, and there's a lot of pressure in public life these days, are the people who start off intuitively knowing what the right thing is, knowing what the right thing to do is. When I got elected, John, I said I was 29, and I won in a year when George McGovern was the candidate. He only got 38% of the vote in my state. I won by a whopping majority of 3,100 votes. And people used to come up to me after that and say, "What's your secret?" every time they'd run statewide, because hell, if I won, there had to be a secret. No, seriously. I was 29, you know. And I tell them the same thing, and I said, Franny's heard me say to a number of candidates the reason why I love this guy. I'd say, you got to know what's worth losing over. You have to decide what is worth losing over. What is the principle? Why are you running? Because when Franny talks about it being not about you, about your constituents, about the people, that's what it means. And there's an awful lot of women and men in both parties, overwhelmingly in the other party, who get up every morning, go out and vote on the House floor, and vote ways they know are not the right way to vote. Mm-hmm. But they're afraid if they in fact vote with the way they think they should, that they'll lose. That big money will come in and support their opponent. I called over 7 of my colleagues in the Senate when they refused to bring up Merrick Garland even for a vote, even for a hearing. All 7 of these folks, and they're my friends, acknowledged to me, "Joe, I know you're right. I know this is a bad precedent, Joe, but I'll get killed. The Koch brothers will come in with $5 million or $10 million. Such and such will happen." I understand it. And I'd never ask another woman or man to act against their own interests. But if you have that attitude, you should get in another line of work, for real. Not a joke. Not a joke. Imagine what it must be like getting up every morning doing what you don't believe. Well, the thing I'm confident about Franny is he'll tell you what he believes, he'll stand by what he says, and he'll listen to the other guy. You learn a lot when you listen. I have a reputation in the Congress, good and bad, that in fact I get along with an awful lot of Republicans. And I do. I make no apologies for that. I make no apologies for that. Because I was raised in a political tradition with a guy, and this is what Franny is in his gut, a guy named Mike Mansfield. When I got there, I didn't want to go to the Senate. Right after I got elected, my wife and daughter were killed in an automobile accident, and my 2 boys were in really bad physical shape before I got sworn in. And I wasn't going to be sworn in, not that anything, no nobility, I just didn't want to go. And Mike Mansfield and Fritz Hollings, there were 5 who just saved my sanity by convincing me to come and just stay a little while. And what used to happen is the majority leader, Mike Mansfield, would have me come by his office every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. And one day I walked over and I'd get an assignment. I thought all senators got assignments. I'm the first United States senator I ever knew. I didn't know you didn't give assignments. I really didn't. I actually thought you got an assignment. And so I showed up, I guess I've been there about 4 months, it was the middle of May, and I showed up, and as I walked through those double doors you see on TV all the time where you get off the elevators and go in to vote, walk down in the well of the Senate, I was walking through and Jesse Helms was standing up excoriating Bob Dole and Ted Kennedy for the precursor for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I listened, and I thank God I had to meet the majority leader, because I would have said something probably impolitic. I walked in and sat in front of Mansfield's desk. By this time I figured out he was basically taking my pulse to see how I was doing every week, how I was getting along with having lost my wife and daughter. And I must have looked very angry. And it's an absolutely true story. My word is abiding. And he looked across his desk and he said, "Joe, what's the matter?" And I lit into Jesse Helms. I said he has no social redeeming value. I went on and on and on. And he looked at me and he said, Joe, what would you say if I told you that in 1969, I believe it was, could have been 70, Dot and Jesse Helms were sitting in their living room reading the Raleigh Observer. And there was a picture of a young man in braces up to his hips, steel braces and steel crutches. I think he was 13 if I'm not mistaken. And said, all I want for Christmas is someone to love me and adopt me. So what would you say if I told you Jesse Helms and Dot adopted that young man? I said, I'd feel like a darn fool. He said, well, Joe, they did. And here's what he said to me. He said, Joe, it's always appropriate to challenge another woman or man's judgment. It's never appropriate to challenge their motive, because you really don't know their motive for sure. You don't know. And once you challenge motive, you say you're a racist, you say you're in the pocket of such and such, you say you're whatever it happens to be. You can never get to yes. You can never get to yes. You can never get to an agreement. Well, that's what's happened in Washington. What's happened in Washington is we don't talk to each other anymore, John. You know, that Senate dining room is no longer there. The dining room, we had two big tables. You'd come over occasionally, and we'd sit two big conference tables. I went up to see some of my folks because that's where I learned about what the senior senators were doing, and that's the place everybody would talk and talk issues and compromise. It's not even there anymore. They took the tables out. They're just lounge chairs in there. We don't talk to each other anymore. And folks, you can't run a democracy. You can't make this system function unless you can reach consensus. Consensus. And here's the point. This young man not only has the heart of a lion, he has a moral compass that has a true north, but he also likes people, and he's completely straightforward. Everybody trusts Franny. Not a joke. Some of you just met him, some of you know him a long time. What's the one thing, have you ever met anybody who doesn't trust Fran Person? And I mean it sincerely. Trust. Trust. I have strong disagreements with my Republican friends. What I can say is self-serving, but they trust me. I've never, ever, ever misled them. Not one single time. Doesn't mean we always get it right, but we get it right a lot more often than we get it wrong. And it's not personal. The thing that I've loved about Franny from the day I met him is he understands, he is decent, he is authentic. And think of the one thing in both the presidential election, right down to your county races. People are looking for authenticity. They're looking for authenticity. They're looking for decency. And the good news is he happens to be smart as hell. Franny has more experience, I mean this sincerely. Franny has more experience in foreign policy than a vast majority of the members of the House and Senate, because he's traveled over almost 1 million miles with me. He sat in with me when I met with Putin, when I met with Poroshenko. I have met every single solitary world leader. I'm going to say something outrageous just because I've been around a long time. Nobody has as personal relationship with as many world leaders as I do. Not because I'm a good guy. It's just been my job. It's been my responsibility. Franny gets it. Franny sits there when we're debating with Putin about missile defense in Europe. Franny's been in the room when I'm trying to convince Poroshenko to deal with an accord that's going to have to do with the border. He sits in the room with me when I flew back from the Middle East on an hour's notice, took a long that, to go to Central America to deal with unaccompanied children at the border. Franny knows. He watches. He understands. He knows the issues. And Franny has the capacity to bring you in. Franny has the capacity to actually get you to open up a little bit. Franny's heard me say 1,000 times, never ask another man or woman to operate against their own self-interest. And what I always do is I sit there and try to put myself in the other man or woman's position. It's a very useful tool to have. He understands it. And if you don't get to a place where you can actually reach accommodation, consensus, this country is going to fall apart.